During a meeting in the House of Lords, Foreign Secretary David Lammy gets called out by Baroness Fox of Buckley for restricting arms sales to Israel, but turning a blind eye to other countries. We will of course check out the clip, whilst also going over all of the latest British political headlines. But first, hit the like button and subscribe to Parliament to keep up to date with all the good and the bad coming out of Westminster. As stated in the intro, Foreign Secretary David Lammy gets called out by Baroness Fox of Buckley for restricting arms sales to Israel, but turning a blind eye to other countries that all seem to be Islamic. Check the footage.
The Minister understand that one of the concerns is that Israel is treated differently and to a higher standard. So I'm delighted to hear that this international law is all seeing and so on. But as somebody who has noted how much there has been in terms of arms sales to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, is the Minister really telling me that every single time David Lammy and his lawyers have looked at it and said, my goodness, what's happening in Yemen is an absolute haven of peace and no humanitarian law has been broken? I mean, I'm just suggesting that people are rather confused, and it feels disingenuous, and it feels as though Israel is being punished, pointed at, demonised, and told that they are in breach of humanitarian law. And they are not. No matter what you say, they are defending themselves, and they are being punished morally, even if not that the number of arms really matters.
This decision has been made consistent with the law to which we are obliged to follow.
What's your thoughts on this, and do you think David Lammy has a bias agenda? Or is it just a coincidence? Let me know in the comments. In other news, Prime Minister Keir Starmer launched a carbon capture scheme today at a press conference. The PM pledged nearly £22 billion in funding for carbon capture and storage (CCS) projects in Merseyside and Teesside. Starmer told the media, "We are the first industrial nation. That's who we are as a country. It's our story, a source of pride that this country, our country, communities like here, change the world, and that what is made here matters. You can't take that away from people without a plan to replace it. It's like losing a part of yourself, a missing limb, an open wound, a heart ripped out of the nation." In other news, Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, has said he will be going after Labour seats in the next general election, rather than Conservative ones. When asked in an interview who Reform's main opposition is, Farage said, "There was no question. It is the sitting government." Farage said, "It's Labour. There's no question about it. It is Labour, and it is those traditional working-class seats in South Wales, in the Midlands, in the north of England. In many cases, seats that have been Labour since the end of the First World War, where their communities, those old Labour voting communities, are so far detached from the North London elite, which the Labour Party has become." Polling data from September shows if another general election were held today, Reform UK would gain 5 additional seats, alongside the 5 it already holds. In the 2024 general election, Nigel Farage's party won 5 seats, had 609 candidates, and received 14.3% of the vote. According to a nowcast model by Election Maps UK, 3 of the 5 seats Reform would win today are currently held by Labour MPs, and the other 2 by Conservatives. Based on opinion polls which gauge voting intentions released since the general election, Reform UK is forecast to take seats in South West Norfolk, Hornchurch and Upminster, Basildon and Billericay, Sittingbourne and Sheppey and Llanelli if an election were held today. In South West Norfolk, currently held by Labour MP Terry Jeremy, Election Maps UK forecasts that Reform would take 25.7% of the vote share, followed by the Tories, 24.4%, and finally, Labour, 23.6%. Similarly, in Conservative MP Julia Lopez's constituency, Hornchurch and Upminster, it is predicted that Reform would take 32.5% of the vote, while the Tories would lag at 31.2%. In Basildon and Billericay, Conservative MP Richard Holden could be ousted as Reform would take 30.5% of the vote, leaving the Tories with 29.3%. Meanwhile, Reform could also gain Sittingbourne and Sheppey from Labour MP Kevin McKenna with 29%, followed by the Tories, 27.3%, and finally Labour, 26%. Finally, in Llanelli, Labour MP Nia Griffith could see her seat taken by Reform, sitting at 28.9%, compared to Labour's 25.8%. In the 2024 general election, Reform came second place in 98 constituencies. In 89 of these cases, it was second to Labour. 60 of these were in the north of England, and 13 were in Wales. Reform continues to poll second in many constituencies across the country with Safe Labour, Conservative or Lib Dem seats, however, in other areas. They are polling very closely with other parties, including Labour, which could swing if another election was held today. 6 seats where Reform are polling very closely with the Labour Party include Amber Valley 1, Labour 33.9% 2, Reform 33.9% Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr 1, Labour 100% 22.7% 2, Reform 20.7% Folkestone and Hythe 1, Labour 31.5% 2, Reform 28.1% Cannock Chase 1, Labour 33.4% 2, Reform 30.2% Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes 1, Labour 38.8% 2, Reform 34.6% Tipton and Wednesbury 1, Labour 33.9% 2, Reform 28.7%. The next general election is not expected to take place until August 2029. Lastly, Angela Knight, former chief executive at Energy UK, has claimed that Chancellor Rachel Reeves will bend the rules to push a climate agenda. The government has pledged nearly £22 billion in funding for carbon capture and storage (CCS) projects in Merseyside and Teesside, despite claiming that they are trying to fill a quote-unquote £22 billion black hole left by the previous government. The funding will support 2 carbon capture clusters, focused on capturing emissions from energy, industry and hydrogen production. Officials expect the projects to remove 8.5 million tonnes of carbon emissions annually, with the first carbon dioxide being stored from 2028. What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comments. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you all next time.